everyone. My name is Maurice Hamilton, and welcome to our podcast that we call Where Humanity Meets Technology, where we like to interview business leaders, business founders, CTOs, CIOs, CSOs, COOs, and different people in different industries to talk about how they are using technology to drive humanity. Today, we have a special guest, and he actually has a lot of experience that we're going to talk about, something that really intrigues me, and that's IIoT, and that is Ian Uriarte. I want to make sure I'm saying it right. Ian Uriarte. So, Ian, welcome to the podcast. I'm really happy to have you today.
Thank you, Maurice. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I have to start my podcast. I always start my podcast and ask the one question, and it's what I call a Genesis question. And that I always talk about, how did it all begin? So you and I have pretty similar backgrounds. We've pretty much been in the same industry for a few years now, a few seasons. We've seen the weather change and season change over time. So how did it all begin for you? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I was commenting to you earlier that it all started when I got a gift for Christmas when I was 5 years old, and it's kind of like a helicopter that was controlled from a little remote that it was like basically like a joystick, right, that allow you to get the helicopter up and down and move in speed. But it was tethered by a cable, and it was very short cable, and it had a little ball, a little NASA capsule and an astronaut, and they had a hook, and the goal of the game was to rescue the astronaut that was floating on the sea supposedly, right? And I was so curious how the helicopter worked. It's electronic, right? And I just remember I just got it, assembled it, was playing in the front porch. And I recall this going through my living room, and my parents, my grandparents, everybody was there. And I passed by, and when I came back, I came back with a hammer. And I went, and I don't think that they really pay attention. They probably saw me with the corner of an eye. And then they hear the banging, and I start banging on where the motor was, and I just broke it. And my father came just yelling, like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I want to know how it works." And so that's how it started. I just curious about how things work, and how since then I think my dad and my mom were buying me these electronic kits and these experimental kits, chemical kits, and so I've been doing that since I was little. I started programming at the age of 15. My dad was a little bit of a gambler. He won a computer in 1981, I believe. It was one of those kind of like an Atari type that you connect to your TV. And the only thing it took was BASIC, and I learned to program BASIC by myself. And so, electronics and computer programming, that's how it all began. And I went into engineering, electrical engineering and software engineering, after that, and, rest is history.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. You're right. I remember those Atari, and a matter of fact, I had an old Commodore 64.
Yeah, the Commodore 64. Yeah.
Right, to learn how to program in BASIC, run. I forget think of the basic commands, but
Yeah.
that was pretty challenging.
Yeah.
So when I look at your company now, and you are the founder and CEO of Timbergrove, and I look at some of the things that you guys do there. Can you tell us a little bit about IIoT and that actually how you guys actually provide additional services to and talk a little bit about the industries that you work with, and how you guys are driving the drive for technology?
Yes, since my early career days were in the world of data acquisition systems, for oil and gas, and then moving to the control systems, for drilling systems. I remember one of my last big projects in what we call telematics, right, which is automation via distance automation. And so we were controlling 13 robots, to automate as much as possible the processes related to drilling. Those days I learned a lot about deterministic networks, control systems. You're talking about sub-second response time. Sometimes milliseconds, talking about under 100 milliseconds, sometimes less, response times for control systems. So in the industrial world, there's a lot of applications that require that, right? Especially on the control side. On the parts of data acquisition, sometimes you don't need the real time, but in industrial environments, it's very common that there are applications that require real time monitoring. And so when the world of IoT started, kind of the phrase became a catchphrase, right? In around 2014, 2015, we started doing some implementations of IoT, and we realized that there were some limitations with what you could do in the world of IoT because of it wasn't meant for real time. And so once you start getting into industrial use cases, you realize you need something a little more sophisticated than just a regular device that calls home. You need something that is going to give you a millisecond response time, or at least in the seconds response time instead of minutes, or a minute or something like that. So we started working on that type of problems, not only on the OT side, the operational technology, which is PLCs, is the SCADAs, on the sensor side, but also on the enterprise side, which is also back in the day, it was kind of new, right? So how do you aggregate a bunch of queuing systems, and and then how do you process data in a way that allows you to do some more robust analytics, like time sliding window, type of analytics, instead of just regular statistical or stochastic processes, and so that's kind of what guided us. We started having some challenges with the current customers. A lot of our customers are kind of industrial settings, transportation and logistics, oil and gas, both for the upstream and downstream, and a lot of the customers in the manufacturing side that require, response times that are, under a second. And so that's how we started looking into the industry, figure out the challenges that you can encounter in IoT, and realizing there's a big difference between industrial IoT and regular IoT, So
Okay. So when I think about that, so it's there's other things that you talk about data acquisition, you talk about the time and how, because a lot of companies need that information like instantaneously.
Mhm.
Are you doing anything like any kind of a sensors, or having any kind of measurements for like preventative maintenance so we can keep the cost of that low, or in some kind of monitoring so that you mentioned SCADA before.
Yep.
Is that those are some of the applications that you also apply with those industries?
Yeah, correct. A lot of the most modern applications that we're looking at, and some of the projects that we're involved in, it's associated with predictive and preventive maintenance. A lot has to do with utilizing data that is coming in real time, and then doing some analytics real time on that data against existing data and patterns that have been already determined by machine learning algorithms, right? And then using machine learning or deep learning to do a prediction, right, about when a machine will go down, what percentage of probability do we have that machine is going to go down, and for how long, right? And so what you do is, you don't want your machines to go down without in an undetermined amount of time. You want to predict when, so that you can put them offline before that happens, and do the predictive maintenance, or whatever. Instead of having to focus on a repair, you're focusing on actually preventing something from happening, right? Because now you have downtime and you have no control over that downtime. But if you plan the downtime, and you could have another machine that takes over for that machine, you're not losing on your productivity. But if it happens live, it might be harder to be able to have a replacement for that machine that is producing for our customers, usually revenue, so revenue producing machinery.
Okay. So my next question, I was going to ask you about some of the positives, and you just mentioned some of the positives, and you also just touched a little bit on some of the challenges and some of the things that can go wrong. What would you say will be some of the biggest challenges that companies have out there, not only once they have the device there, but I guess I probably should ask this question first. Do you find that some companies are still reluctant to actually implement this new technology at this, even right now, where we are? Because you clearly talked about some of the benefits there. Do you see
Yeah.
that sometimes it's challenging for just to have a conversation with some of these leaders and say, hey, look, you really need to actually have that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We find that uh, part of the issue is not having clarity on what the value, and we're talking about value, understanding numerically what the ROI of an investment for IoT would be, right? It requires some homework, right? Because you got to understand, first of all, where are you losing money or where you think you will lose money. Then it will require understanding how much an implementation will cost. And those numbers are not readily available. I mean, IoT, for all the hype that has been for the last 7, 8 years, there's still not enough data out there, especially in the industrial world, on what it will take to implement things. A lot of projects fail at the stages of proof of concept or end at the proof of concept without delivering, going further, right? A lot has to do with, it's usually, very expensive firms have been doing this, right? I mean, you're talking about some of the majors, right? And those are usually not tiny projects. And so I think part of it is do they have enough data to do an analysis on what ROI would be, and so when we sit down with customers, there's a lot of education and trying to first of all understand how much pain they have, because if there's not enough pain, there's no education that will help them, invest into this, right? You have to have a pain that is so big that it will move them to action. Recently we had a major company come to us with a problem associated with tracking tools, and they were losing, tens of millions of dollars on these devices, and it's something that can definitely be fixed through, industrial IoT. A lot of these problems come associated. It's not just technology, it's processes, people. We know, right? I mean, you can just throw technology at something, but also is how do you get those numbers, right? And so, you as an agency that we are, we try to figure out. We spend a long time upfront with the client trying to estimate what this will look like in terms of return of investment. So first of all, how much it will cost, right, to implement something like this. And there's a lot of variables, so you have to compartmentalize this into, parts of the solution. And once you do that and able to say this area of the project will solve this particular problem, and if you have enough data about what the cost, of that problem is, then you can have an ROI, right? And so, but it's a lot of conversations. You have to have those are very real conversations that there has to be trust in both ends, right? The customer has to believe that by giving us those numbers, we're just taking that to be able to come up with a solution that will get value. And so I think that's the key, right? Is having a trusted advisor that can work with you, that knows, how to implement these solutions. That's been a big issue for most of the customers. And then in the end, it's, do they have enough data to even figure out how to go about, implementing this? Because, without ROI, most companies, they don't want to invest. And so that's been probably the biggest deterrent of, industrial IoT taking, over, like, it's been predicted for the last, 7, 8 years.
Hmm. Interesting point. And so Ian, when you guys do it, are you actually using their current software applications, or do you have to actually kind of like you mentioned PLC and everything? Do you have to customize the applications that's going to work with their device?
No, we have multiple ways to approach this, right? It depends on things like security, right? Which when you know a lot about that, Maurice. And so, how they handle the networks, whether do they, we need access to their control network versus just the data acquisition piece, right? And so multiples. We've done things where we actually plug in right into their control network, just with the read access only to be able to view the tags coming from the PLCs and generate data in that way. In other places, we are not allowed to be in the control network, and I understand why, right? There's concerns about security, and the way we do it is we either connect on the existing sensors, and we have basically a repeater, to repeat the signal, or in other places, we even have to install our own sensors, right? Because the customer doesn't want us to touch any of those sensors that are already in the field, because it might be from part of an OEM, and warranty might be an issue. And so we install additional sensors. So many ways to do it. And in terms of the applications, the software applications, we work with what the client has. If you already have data flowing into your enterprise servers, in terms of data, like a SQL databases or big, big volume databases, like you have a big data databases that are like Cassandra, right? We work within that as well, and so we just add other components that make an industrial, IoT solution real, right? So you're talking about scalability is one of the biggest issues. So, on the enterprise side, making sure that you have a time series database that scales. Sometimes doing maybe processing in memory databases, queuing systems, like MQTT, but sometimes you will have multiple MQTT servers, because you have a lot of time real-time data coming in. So you have something like a Kafka, which is an orchestrator, for queues. And then on the other end, some rule engines to allow you to generate, alerts and generate tickets, like for asset management and things of that nature, So
Okay.
yeah, it's a
Okay.
lot of components that need to be used. And so some companies have a lot of these components, some
Hmm.
don't, And so we come in and we use what they have, and then add after we do kind of a gap analysis, we come up with, here's a potential solution, and here's maybe a target architecture. And sometimes, the target architecture is very long term, so we do an intermediate, multiple intermediate target architectures, to get to that final one, So
Interesting. Ian, we were kind of talking about the Jetsons, the old TV cartoon from many,
yeah.
many years ago. But I think about right now, you hear a lot of some of these cities talk about we want to be a smart city,
Mm.
and most of the things when they do in applications, a lot of it has to do with carbon neutral and electric cars and things like that. I think it's a lot more than that. So I think
Yeah.
there's so much more that when we talk about how we can actually things are going to change in the future. When you look at the future right now, what are some of the trends that you are seeing, and some of the events that you think that's gonna partake in the industrial world over the next, I would say within the next decade? What do you think that's heading?
Yeah, I think, I mean, clearly, the biggest game changer right now is artificial intelligence, right? And a lot of people, when you said those two words, are thinking ChatGPT, right? To me, it's yeah, ChatGPT, there's no doubt, is it's been a groundbreaking application. There are so many other things out there, right? That are that is not related to large language models, like ChatGPT. I think that there's a lot of applications that you can use large language models like ChatGPT to structure data and allow you to have a more intelligent query, or actually I would say a dumber query that doesn't require a lot of knowledge to be able to extract data, right? It still requires some level of expertise. So to me, a lot of people say, AI is displacing jobs. I don't see it that way. I see it, AI is making people who know already, right, about a subject matter, so SMEs, experts, more productive, right? Because if you ask the right questions to ChatGPT, you can get better answers, right? Than if you have broad questions. Like in our team, we have some of the junior analysts that use some of that to help, speed up some processes. And when I revise their work, it's like, oh, well, this is not exactly this way. This is, where do you get this? Well, I got it from, ChatGPT or whatever are the ones that they're using. And so we got together and said, show me your prompts. And then it's like, by changing the prompts a little, we get a completely different response, right? And so, but you need somebody who knows that, is that answer correct or not, right? And so for that, you need expertise, or you need some sort of knowledge, And so I don't think it's going to displace, it's going to make more productive, right? It's kind of like the steam engine, right? It enabled productivity back, a long time ago to exponentially produce more, right? And so I think that's what AI is going to do, allow us to do that. So AI is the first thing. I think that when we talk about predictions, and predictive, when I talk about AI, to me that's part of the same, in the same bucket of things, but this is with data. So how do you predict an outcome with more certainty, right? And having the ability to process large amounts of data. I think that's has been happening since early mid 2000s. It's been growing in the 2010s, and now we're in a place where processing large volumes of data and big data is a lot simpler, and we need it, right, in order to be able to crunch these big models, right? I think that to me, when I look at the future, I see I see more productivity because of AI. I see more productivity because of big volume um, processing engines, that are getting better at processing this amount of data. And also, we're getting cloud computing became it's so ubiquitous now, right? It's like if you don't, if you're doing cloud, you're not doing cloud, you're definitely what rock you've been living under, right? Because it's a huge thing. And so and clearly cybersecurity is a key part of the future because the more we do, the more we realize that especially because we're in the cloud, everything is out there connected, interconnected, and you don't have the right prevention methods and the right shields, it all can come down, and so yeah, to me those are the key areas, right? We talk about mobile computing, which has been already a revolution. I think for me in the industrial world is the edge computing, the ability to have small processors on the edge
Mm-hmm.
and be able to do localized machine learning, right? Because it will be very difficult to keep passing the amount of data that we want to pass from OT, right? The operational technology devices into the cloud, right? So I think you're going to have to move some of these computational capabilities to the sites, right, on the edge, right? And I think that as processors keep growing I mean, when you're talking about the terabytes capabilities of or petabytes capabilities, some of these processors you're talking about NVIDIA, and NVIDIA and all those small computing devices, it's funny because NVIDIA is known for their usually in the past, for the visual, the display cards and the GPUs. But nowadays, they even make the small industrial computing devices that are for the edge, and they're super powerful. I mean, the amount of computational power that they have is incredible, and then now you can have that on the edge. 5 years ago, you couldn't, so now you can. I mean, you could, but it would have been a huge machine, right? Yeah, so.
I I agree with you, and I was thinking about that, and I like how you made that comment to say that it's going to create more jobs. There's going to be more jobs in that particular area because that's the direction that we're heading, you know.
Mhm.
And I think that there's you spot on with that with talking about the edge computing and how we're actually migrating there, and we're getting there pretty quick,
We
so
are.
it's going to happen pretty fast there.
Yeah.
So this is great. So, Ian, this has been really enlightening. You gave us a really deep dive into IoT here. We talked a little bit about the future. So, and that's the kind of conversation I want to have. I think that this is exciting, and to me, it's just like it's happening like in color. Like you go from black and white from the Wizard of Oz, and all of a sudden everything's in color because it's moving really, really fast
Yeah,
here,
yeah, it
and
is.
you got to stay up and keep up with it. And I think that the people that eventually people, like you said, if unless you're living on a rock, you will eventually come on. The question is, you don't want to get too far behind and if
Yes.
you get too far behind, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah,
And
that's right. That's right.
that's,
Yeah,
this is good. A lot of opportunities. A lot of I can see like data scientists and all kind of analytics and people that are really, really good with algorithms. It's going to be a really great future. And as we migrate more and more towards that area. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Maurice. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. This has been a very, very good intellectual conversation here, Ian. I'm really happy to have that. So, Ian Uriarte, we want to thank you for being he's the founder and CEO of Timbergrove. And Ian, I don't know if you want to put your website out there if you want people to go and check you out,
Sure. Yeah.
guys, some business your way.
Thank you. Timbergrove.com. And I mean, there's a blog there as well. And we try to keep somehow the blog updated with some of the things that we're finding in the field and some of the challenges that we find. So, for those of you who are following industrial IoT, machine learning, and in industrial settings, probably good. Few of our blog posts will be a good read for you. So yeah,
Awesome.
timbergrove.com. Yeah, thank you.
You got it, got it. I definitely try to send some business your way. This has been very good.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it, Maurice. Same here.
All
Good
right.
talking with
So
you.
likewise, guys, you just heard it. We had a really great conversation here. And we want to thank you for joining our podcast today. And we have plenty more coming up in the future here. So we want to thank our special guest, Ian Uriarte with Timber Grove, and we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one.